Okay, when
Brilliant. So, welcome to week 4. For those who are regulars, welcome back. It's so good to see you again. I am just going to go through all the technical things that I went through last week. I'm also promised not to touch any buttons, so hopefully there'll be no disasters, no crashing of the system, and it will be nice and smooth sailing. So just some brief reminders then. So just to remind everyone that if you are participating, that this session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube afterwards, which you'll automatically be sent the link to. So if you don't want to participate, please then rejoin as a viewer, and you can still watch and participate on our HackPad as well. So so people on here, we've got Catherine on the HackPad all the way from Galway. So welcome, Catherine. Can I also to remind you that chat on the side of this video recording is not recorded. So I know we had a few people join us late last week, so they didn't actually see the comments, but any links or any information that you want to put on there, although we can copy and paste them onto the HackPad, we'd rather do that later and afterwards, or just ask you to directly paste your link onto the HackPad for everyone to see. And that's an easier way of people getting the information that they need. So again, as always, this is great for you to have participation, to join in, have your comments and thoughts would be great. If I can ask you, if you want to speak, if you could just introduce yourself, just say your name. So you just say, hi, it's Natalie, and then go into your comment, just so other people listening will know who's talking at the right time. So again, the session is going to work where I'm going to be on the HackPad and field any questions, read out any comments and thoughts you might have, and Baya's going to lead this session. So I'm going to hand over to Baya.
Okay, thank you very much everyone for coming. Thank you for your contributions on the forum so far as well. Not only this week, but you know, the previous week. This is actually week 4. We can hardly believe it because time has gone very, very quickly. So this week is reflection week. We can actually put it this way. So again, I go back to our idea when we were putting together this School of Open course. So basically during week 1 you had a chance to think about what it is, what does it mean to do research in the open. During week 2 you had a chance to think about ethics. Last week we talked a bit about the advantages or disadvantages of dissemination in the open dissemination. So for this week we wanted to talk about reflection and what does it mean to do reflection? What does it mean to do that reflection in the open? We asked you to think a little bit about who does the reflection if you're working on a project, or even if you're just working on doing research on your own. When you should do that reflection. We showed you a couple of examples of people who blog their reflections, but we've also hopefully we've introduced you to different tools to do your reflection. So it doesn't have necessarily. I think maybe we think of reflection immediately as something that we write down, but you know, there's other forms of doing reflection, and that's what we wanted to introduce to you. And then for the last activity of this course, which obviously, I mean, this is Thursday, so you still have time to do it if you want it, is this idea that we wanted you to reflect about your own openness while you're doing research. So think about how open you have been previous to this course, let's say, and have you learned something, or have you decided to be more open, or maybe less open than what you were before you started doing the course. So that's very much what we've covered this week. But I'm going to start, and I want to make it again very informal. So I can talk about things from my own experience and from the experience of the OER Research Hub. But again, you know, come in whenever you you want to come in. We think about, when you think about the idea of reflection at the OER Research Hub, we've connected that idea of reflection with the idea of evaluation. And you think of evaluation. Of course, it depends whether you are just researching on your own, or if you're researching on a team, in a team like what we've done here. For us, it was very important to, obviously you're going to have a responsibility towards your funders, for instance, or towards the rest of the community that you're doing your research in. But it's this idea, of course, of reflecting, because you want to check that everything is going according to plan. So if you said you were going to do X, Y, Z, that X, Y, Z are progressing nicely. But it's also the idea of evaluation as in kind of a more in-depth reflection, if you think about it. And when we started thinking about doing this kind of evaluation reflection, we actually started thinking about it from the very beginning of the project. One of the first outputs actually of the project was this evaluation framework. I don't know whether you've had a chance to look at it, but the link is there on the course. Basically, it's a link to the OER Research Hub website where the evaluation framework lives. But for us, it was very important to reflect as a team and as individuals, but not just reflect for the sake of reflecting, but in a way we kind of decided what it was that we wanted to reflect about. So we set a number of questions for ourselves, as one of the things that Leanne talks about in the little recording that you have there in the first activity of this week, is this idea that it is just not, well, okay, I'm going to think and reflect, but it's you want to reflect for a reason, and you set yourself a series of questions that you want to think about. So, for instance, in our case, we wanted to do some reflection, some evaluation on where, for instance, the analysis techniques that we were using with the data, were they, the right analysis techniques, or even in terms of collecting the data, were we collecting the right data, in terms of ethical issues as well, were we taking care of any ethical issue that could arise, and the same thing with dissemination. So it's this idea that you just don't reflect for the sake of reflecting, but you reflect, you kind of give yourself prompts, and you reflect together as a team, or also as an individual. So at this stage, I would like to, I'm gonna just kind of be quiet for a while and invite your contributions. What do you think? What has been your experience in terms of doing reflection, or in terms, whether as individuals or as a team? Does anybody want to come in?
Okay, I'll have a go. I was trying to work out what the difference was between review, which I'm familiar with in business terms, and reflection. I think I came to the conclusion that reflection is more personal, it's more internal, it's more not simply evaluating the results, but saying, why was I asking this question? Did I get out what I expected? Were my expectations reasonable? So perhaps more a reflection on personal objectives, if you like, as well as the things you would write down in terms of sort of the objectives of the study. Other than that, reflection seemed to be a sort of different word for just the standard review one does in any sort of business cycle, to me, at least.
I think there's a process in reflection which is different from review, because reflection has a slightly different sort of structure. so that everything that you are reviewing doesn't become a circular argument. And in reflection, there is at some point looking at questions outside of yourself. I think that's what good reflection is. Otherwise, you're always answering your own questions. So some sort of structure, and changing that structure every so often according to different models is very important. That makes it reflection.
And so, Eleanor, when you mention these questions outside yourself, where would those questions come from? In a sense, I want to come into the idea of do we always do that reflection as individuals, or do we do the reflection with somebody else?
I think that entirely depends upon what your project is and what you have available. I think it's very possible to do it completely by yourself, having learnt some techniques. I think what I mean really by the questions outside of yourself is, I suppose, having quite a rigorous process of reflection where at some point you pose some opposite questions, but you continually do that and imagine different ways that things could have gone, or other ways. I just think if you don't have quite a strong process, it's quite easy to miss that stage out because you think you know it.
So Eleanor, do you already have preset questions in mind? And I was kind of wondering about Guy as well. If you had a chance to look at Leanne's video, did you automatically think of questions that help you form that structure? Or was that an easy thing to do?
Yeah, I did look at that. In a way, that whole area of reflection is my area of research. I've been looking at lots of different models of reflective practice, and a lot of them do come from education and are used in business, but some of them are quite different, and in a way it got a bit complicated thinking that I could collate them all and boil them up into one perfect system, but that doesn't really work. So I think it's the variety of approach, really, and possibly changing that every so often. All sorts of different Venn diagrams of reflection. So as for specific questions, it's kind of difficult to come up with that off the cuff.
I think perhaps the problem with structure is if it's a structure you've identified before the process and you only review in that structure, then you will perhaps miss the most important things, the most interesting things, which are the things that happen that you didn't expect, or some of the outlying stuff you came across that challenges some of the hypotheses maybe you were trying to test. So I'm all for structure, and I think any review has to be within a structure, but I think one cell of that structure has to be, what didn't I put into this structure? What happened that I didn't expect? What does it tell me? How does it change what I might do in the next cycle?
And I wonder, to what extent can you have like somebody, like a different person coming in to have a look at that structure? It's like a fresh pair of eyes, which they're gonna kind of help you look at or think about, push that thinking, and anyway, what you have missed.
Maybe that's one of the real inbuilt advantages of open research, is that questions are going to arrive and you're going to be challenged about your processing in surprising ways.
Okay, so we've talked about, so how do you see, how personal do you see reflection? Is there some kind of is it counterproductive to talk about reflection and to do reflection in the open? So what do you think? Can we actually think about reflection as something personal that we cannot really? For instance, I go back to the examples that we gave you in the activity. So, can I actually blog about personal reflection?
Guy, sort of going along from that, Guy, can I ask another question to add on that? So bearing in mind what you were saying about your understanding of what reflection meant and review, you realised that it was a more personal effect. So how did you feel about that?
More comfortable in this environment than I would have felt in the business environment. In business, who you are and how that impacts how you work is something you sort of keep in the background. You sort of tend to keep a shield between yourself and your work to some extent. I think research is inevitably more personal. Because in this sort of sociological area, it's inevitably about people. But B, I think there's a bit more honesty that you're not simply trying to fulfill a defined role that fits somebody else's model. You're trying to define a model that you can identify with and feels personal to you. So I think the sort of more inherently personal aspect of particularly humanities type of research makes it feel more personal than a business experience ever would. I guess if it was your own company, it might get a bit personal, but not in a conventional corporate environment.
Okay, but I'm just curious about it. Just going back to the same thing. So Eleanor says that in the arts, it is like reflection is totally personal. So yes, the reflection is always personal. So, but what do you think? To what extent can we actually share that personal reflection in the open? It's the two examples that we gave you when we asked you to have a look at Megan's blog and Catherine's blog. So we have the kind of two different examples. Because Megan is saying, you know, she starts blogging. She's very much a beginner, and she said, look, it's okay to blog and to share your thoughts, even if your thoughts are not with that reflection. It's not really an accomplished reflection. It's not the final package. And in the case of Catherine, what we have is we have a person who's blogging very clearly about their thinking, about their research, and inviting that conversation. You know, inviting all the people to actually make comments, and how that is then gonna help that argument or that discussion to kind of grow a bit. So again, I pass it on to you. I mean, how can we share reflection? Can we share our reflection if it is a personal reflection?
I think you're definitely coming to the differences between the arts and humanities and the sciences there, because in the arts you would definitely share personal things, but you are more used perhaps to your personal reflection being put up for critical conversation, and that's part of what the arts does, and so you become quite robust about being able to share quite personal things, and it's appropriate for that. Whereas I can't see how that would be. Well, it's actually very good, I think, when scientists share their personal thoughts and their doubts and so on. But there's definitely degrees of that.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up a point that Catherine's made about reflecting openly on the hackpad, and she's just written here, which I thought was quite nice. I've been surprised and sometimes overwhelmed by the diversity of people and opinions I've come into contact with. So going along with you, Eleanor, that you are leaving yourself open, but her benefits are that she's learned about others doing similar research and found resources that she would never have found. So it is that balance of being open and sharing, and then, as you say, being robust and dealing with everything that comes to you. It's almost like a filtering process.
When you so Eleanor, for instance, do you share any of the reflections that you do?
Yes, I share some very personal reflections, but although it's an open blog, it's to a closed group, and so it's not completely open. But I think having done that for so long now, I'm ready to take a further step, and I'm feeling more happy about that. And especially, you know, it's been really good during the course to discuss, well, just because it's open doesn't mean everything has to be completely open. There are certainly things that it's a question of timing as well, isn't it, with your own processing. But I've certainly found it useful to be open. I've found it enriches the practice and the responses, and I quite like all that, the critical discourse about my admissions. You know, before I've actually completely thought it through, I don't mind sharing some of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Eleanor has just identified is perhaps the other sense of the word open. To talk about open data and open dissemination. Here we're talking really about a personal openness, and perhaps that characterizes the people who feel comfortable in an open environment, that they are people who want to be challenged, want to challenge themselves, feel comfortable with that, whereas perhaps the traditional publishing model, where everything is checked within an inch of its life, then peer-reviewed in a narrow sense, and then published almost within walls around it, that's probably the antithesis of open. So perhaps we're saying open research also involves people who are open-minded, have an open attitude to criticism, even if it's criticism of themselves.
I think that is a very good point. I think you actually go back to is it Catherine I heard this from? I'm not sure anymore. It was I think it was Catherine during her, hello Catherine. It was during her keynote at ALSI that Catherine was talking about openness and how people first think about open education as free education, right? And then on top of that, there are other people who think about open education as, you know, you attach a Creative Commons license, an open license to it. But then, because above that, and it's this idea that it's nearly like openness is more like a state of mind. And I hope I'm quoting Catherine properly, but when it goes to that idea, and in a sense, I think that's from a personal point of view, that's what I would like to aspire to get to. I mean, do my best to get to that level. You might get to that state of mind, but then the practicalities associated, the actions associated with that state of mind actually might be a little bit more cumbersome, let's say. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It goes to, you need to get to a position where you're comfortable yourself with what you share, and even if you're thinking it's not exactly, you know, you might. I think there was somebody mentioned it in the forum that they were afraid to share in case that somebody stole their ideas, which I think that I find it slightly. I find it very curious, because something that you would think when you were in school and you kind of were writing your composition and you just didn't want anybody else to see what it is that you're writing. But so it's very interesting that that now, as okay, saying grown-ups, if you want to put it that way, we're still thinking about that. Yeah, that's a very good point, Guy. I really like that comment. Yeah.
I think. Sorry.
Sorry, Eleanor. Just to say that Catherine's kind of agreeing with you, Bea. She says it is a movement through different phases and levels of understanding of openness, and it is very personal.
I think it's also a process of that sort of explicitness and transparency in your process or whatever you're sharing. That is also something that you need to learn, because it's quite hard sometimes to identify all the stages that you're going through that you can be open about. So I think the idea of being open allows you to possibly crystallize in small steps along the way, because you kind of underline it by being open, and you're having to round it up in stages. And I think being open like that, it doesn't come naturally to many people or at all stages of your project. And we have to learn that the transparency and being explicit.
Yeah, because I go back, I'm just kind of thinking of the difference. I was kind of thinking about the difference. How is it different depending on the subject you're working on? So you've mentioned business, we've mentioned humanities. Do you think some subjects is actually easier being open than other subjects?
I don't think it's science and arts, or even humanities. I mean, within the humanities, let's say my interest area of development education, if you were researching the number of schools who had access to the internet, the number of classes who exercise some sort of collaborative learning, that would be fairly, narrow objective stuff. If however you were, more like a science investigation, it's just numbers and facts. If you were talking to a set of teachers and really trying to understand what in their cultural background or their training or their personal self-confidence caused them still to be didactic and not want to move into the less powerful position of encouraging inquiry-based learning, then it would be a much more sensitive position, much more what you're regarding as a sort of arts investigation. But I think there's a spectrum. I think it depends very much on what you're investigating, how personal it is, how much these personal factors, both in your own behaviour and in your subject's behaviour, might come into it.
Yep. Anybody want to come in? Okay, so let me throw some other comment in the pot here. So the OER Research Hub, we've been, as I was saying to you in the beginning, we've been doing this reflection very much as a team. We've been doing reflections as individuals, in the sense that, for instance, we had a Google document where we could, it was a shared Google document that we could come in at any point, and whenever we felt like we would write a paragraph or a few lines or whatever. And then we did a little reflection together as a group. At some point we even invited an external evaluation, somebody who didn't know us at all to come in and help us through that process. There's a comment that one of Dita Bevan in the little audio podcast that we have in first activity. She talks about that she considers that it's very important to bring in the participants of your research. So in a way, the people you're researching, it's how important it is to bring them in and into that process of reflection as well. So it's this idea that a lot of the time, see for instance, see if I'm doing an interview, see if I'm interviewing Natalie, for instance, for whatever her views on project management. At some stage, I should kind of bring her in as well and ask her, for instance, well, how did that interview go for you? How, what did you learn out of that interview as well? So, which is something that I think we often forget. It's not us researchers. Yes, we do a reflection, but the people we are researching can help us also do that reflection. Is there anything? Is that something you agree with or you disagree with? Or is it something that maybe you haven't thought about? No? That's fine. That's okay. I'll leave it there for you. Please think about it. Okay. The other thing that's quite interesting. See how we're talking implicitly we're talking about reflection, and we're talking about sharing our reflections, and all the time we're thinking about blogs, and we think so. A blog immediately, what we're going to do with a blog is we're going to write, and yes, it's true that through the process of writing is already like a process of reflection. But I'm very interested in seeing all the forms of reflection. And so it's not that we can do reflection just not only by writing, but your reflection could take any other shape or form. So some of the examples that we've given you, if you kind of more, if you have an eye for visuals, then your reflection can actually become an infographic or just a photograph or just a series of drawings or sketches or whatever it is. You could use I saw a very good Storyfy yesterday from somebody called Karen Fassenhaus. He put together a series of tweets on K-12 and OER, which I thought was very good, and I thought that it actually needed a lot of reflection actually to go through the process of putting together a story, telling a story, putting together different tweets, for instance. So that's another thing that we wanted to get you to think about is how there are all the forms of doing that reflection and then sharing that reflection. So again, I'll put it to you. Does anyone have any examples of when you reflect? Do you always reflect in writing? Do you also reflect by talking to somebody and maybe recording that, or is it? Are we all really kind of writing when it comes to reflection?
I just thought that all the many different platforms discussed, I don't use half of those, and I also admitted I'm not a particularly early adopter with these kinds of technology because it's a question of time and efficiency as well. So, I'll kind of come round to something, but I am aware that that in itself is a really worthwhile thing to research and choose. At the end of the course, you asked us sort of lots of questions. Well, what will you do now, and what's your research thing? And I really thought, well, hang on a minute. I've got to think about all this. There's so much to think about. It's brilliant, and but actually the format, that was really one I hadn't really looked around, seen what's aware, and so that's an open door for me to wander down sometime in due course. Yeah, and see what works best for others, and then use that, because it's more efficient that way, I guess.
Exactly. It's a bit like everything else. It's about finding what you're comfortable with. So it was in terms of what you want to what you want to reflect on, but also what part of that personal reflection do you want to share, and also how are you gonna share what's the shape of your reflection. So yes, of course, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of things, lots of different tools that we can experiment with and see where that brings us. I mean, I think it's actually very positive that that at least we may just think about considering other ways of reflection other than just writing. But yeah, as you say, I mean, yes, I did ask the questions, and because I wanted to reflect, but there's in due course basically that can be done. I just thought that maybe some people do like writing, some other people actually don't like writing, and they might say, actually, I kind of express myself using photography or using something else. So I was just curious to find out whether somebody, any of you had actually done something like that. So I don't know.
I've got a few comments on the hack pad here. So a couple of things mentioned, things as simple as talking to colleagues and using that as a reflection process. Mind maps, again, and Catherine mentions using, again, that visual artifacts of storing things. So Google plus Flickr, Instagram, all those are kind of a sharp way of keeping a record. So just some examples that other people are using.
Yeah. Mariano.
Dime. Sorry, I was somewhere else. Tell me.
No, it's all right. I was just wondering, are you more like a writing man, or do you use photography? Or no? I mean, I was just wondering. Don't worry about it.
I like to use colleagues to reflect and to use them, use their help to help myself in some way by talking about things and in some way looking at perspectives that I haven't been able to look at. I mean, in the end, we can be quite limited or constrain ourselves into what we are looking at and get into the root, and in some way just get into the mindset and unable to see the world in any other color. I mean, there are plenty of tools for reflection. I mean, we get plenty of people. We got Kolb, Learning Cycle as a tool to reflect. John Martin, Act, Plan, Act, etc. Well, but I like the questioning of people, naive questioning of people that helps you to see things in a completely different light. As well, it has to be, for me, reflection has to start from a point that you got a plan. You have follow a plan. If you don't follow the plan, if you are just doing anything that comes to your mind and then you reflect, you are not going to be reflecting, saying, okay, how did the things went according to the plan? If you don't have a plan, you cannot compare. If you just do the thing, you cannot reflect on what you were trying to do. You are just reflecting and thinking about what you have done. No in comparison with something. Just to finish, just I like talking to people and in some way letting them question me saying, okay, and how did it go? What did you do? Why you did it, etc. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, that's actually, yes, that's very true. So what I'm thinking is like the beauty about then doing the reflection in the open is so see if you just kind of scale that up a bit. So in terms of instead of okay, we grab the colleagues in the office and they help us move what that's taken along, or they help us discover new things. So that's exactly what happens if you're gonna put that reflection in the open. So if you okay, if you ask exactly the same question that you're asking your colleague, if you ask that question when you ask it online, you ask it on Twitter, or you ask it because you read in a blog, or because you recorded yourself, you know, talking about something, and then you ask that question online openly, what you're doing is, it's not just your colleague sitting right next to you in the same office, but it's like the whole world could actually come back to you with an answer to your question, or just just look at things from a different angle. So yeah, that's a very, very good point. That's a very good point. So that gives us a good idea of the difference between kind of doing it openly and just doing it. I'm gonna say not that openly. If you see what I mean? Yeah.
I imagine that the danger here in being open in the reflections depends on the context and the situation in which you are. I mean, there is some kind. It has to be some kind of a safe environment. If you are exposing yourself to your people who is willing to damage you, and you are giving away in the end you are giving away information on what you have done, and somebody can pick up that information to build or to destroy. So it depends as well on the context. I mean, it boils down as well as boils down to who you are, how happy are you with yourself, and how much you mind other people putting you to pieces, breaking you into pieces.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just laughing because this idea. Why does anybody? I mean, why would they want to break you into pieces? You know, it's not like. Think about it. Yes, if you do it openly, you're gonna expose yourself to criticism. But think about it. If that criticism is also open, then you can always come back and counterattack. If you think, if you want to put the right, I mean, I don't know whether that is the right word, but it's not like just criticism that stays there, but you have the opportunity to actually come back and give an answer to that criticism, and just continue to support your point, or if it is constructive criticism, then move along, and your argument is going to move along different paths. It's just, I wouldn't like you to think about being open as being exposed, and being exposed as a bad thing, but more like yes, I'm open, I'm exposed, but take that as a learning opportunity. I don't know. Maybe I'm too naive, or I'm too positive about that.
No, I'm not saying it as something that by exposing yourself. In the end, you are exposing yourself. That is no doubt about that. And the thing is, not everybody is going to, or mostly nobody will do anything with that data that you are giving. And in the end, it's a matter of you are exposing yourself in the open just to try to learn from about yourself. So that is not any problem with that. Is the case that there might be the case in which people try to take advantage of that information, and depends. As I said at the beginning, depends on the context and the situation that you are. Yay. That's okay. So yeah, it's from the very beginning, I don't have any problem with that, because in the end, it's a matter of trusting and being happy with yourself and with the rest of the people. in the end you are just learning, you know. The other thing is just depends on the context. Not everybody is having the same aim. Somebody can be trying. Not somebody, if not. I mean, it's just quite strange for me to say somebody may try to use that information against you, but might happen.
I was going to say, I think that sadly, unfortunately, there are those rare cases where these things do happen. But you know, from the conversations that are happening on the HackPad that people are talking about, it is that leap of faith. It is about saying, yes, I'm going to do this, and relying on that network that you're contributing to or you're leaping into to support you, and viewing it as that way rather than you know, worrying about the person that's going to abuse your openness or your you know, insecurities of saying, here I am, criticize me, rather than just going, here's my network, here are the people that I've been listening to, I've been following, let's see how they're going to deal when I jump off that bridge and go, right, I need to be support here. And you will guarantee that 9 times out of 10, thankfully, that's the way it works. There's this openness. As some of the comments again have been about building resources, building, you know, the community, getting to know how people think about these things, and actually just people respecting you for who you are and actually having an opinion.
Yeah.
So if you hold back, sometimes that's where you fall down, is because you have a really good opinion, but where do you share it? And it's like, come on, get out there and do it.
Completely agree, Natalie. It's just, there is the risk, but if you don't risk, you don't gain. So it's just that thing, you know. So there is the trade-off that you have to make whenever you are making that reflection, nothing else.
Very true.
We had a discussion earlier in the week about whether you needed to be an established researcher to be a successful open researcher. And I think we're touching on that again now, that if you have an established reputation, then the marginal risk of going out on a limb in some open way is quite low. If you don't have an established reputation and you say something which other people queue up to kill you for, then it's not so easy. So I think as well as the external environment being potentially a sort of winner-loser culture like in the States, I think it depends a little bit on how much sort of reservoir of reputation you have when you start.
Yes, obviously, you know, if you have a reputation, but I'm still amazed how we go into our thinking that actually, you know, if you're gonna share your thoughts that if you don't have a reputation, that the people are gonna queue up to attack you. No, guys, don't think about that. I mean, I don't think I have a reputation. I only started blogging maybe a year ago, and I'm not, you know, I'm trying to, little by little, just learning and putting my thoughts out there. And to be honest, what happens is not people queuing up to kind of criticize me. It's more for me. The problem is to get people to read my blog rather than you know. So don't think about that. Don't think. And how are you going to build your reputation as well? You know, the more you have a voice, the more you gotta, you know, that if it is that reputation, that online reputation, what you're after, you know, the more you share, the more you have a voice, the better it's gonna be. I'm thinking.
And Guy, in that conversation you had, did you have a discussion about how you build a reputation in the first place? Because again, oh, sorry. So maybe I'll ask other people, is how do you build that reputation? Because if you don't take the risks, how do you start? How do you learn? How do you develop?
You're right. You have to do it, and also, although you're going to be a bit careful and try to avoid problems, there's absolutely no way you can preempt all possible responses. It's part of putting out any research. closed research, open research, anything, as soon as you put it out there, you're going to get something unexpected back. And so I suppose that another really good thing about what we've discussed during the course is that we can try this out in small projects and see what works for us and how to do it, really, what to be open with, and see how we can deal with that kind of response, if indeed we get any at all.
Exactly. That's yeah. That I couldn't put it more beautifully. Ellen. That's exactly what we wanted you to do.
I was going to so I'm going to ask a question again based around that, and something that's mentioned on the hack pad here about, you know, if you write your blog and you're leaving yourself open to comments, what about you commenting on other people's blogs? How do you feel about that? And do you do it?
Sorry, I'm laughing about something else.
Okay.
I suppose it's part of the conversation. It's probably a very good idea to do that. It's like artists buying other artists' work. You just do that. However, it's all about time as well, isn't it? So you can't get involved with every conversation. But I think in principle, yes, that's got to be a really good way of contributing and understanding how it all works.
That's
But
right.
being very selective indeed.
Yeah. Okay, we're just coming towards the end of the hour, really. I know? Okay, the last activity that we asked you to do this week is to do a bit of a reflection on basically how open you were before you started the course. What kind of thinking process you've gone through with regard to your own openness as you were doing the course, reading the different materials or taking part in the different activities. Whether there is some kind of I wouldn't call it exactly a resolution, but what it is that if you have decided to, maybe you have decided to change what you were doing in terms of doing research and being a bit more open. So I know that there's we haven't had a lot of time to do that or to cover all this stuff during the course. We welcome the forums will stay open for quite a while, so you can still contribute to and give that reflection if you wanted to do it. But I was just curious if somebody has actually thought about that, and if anyone has any thoughts to share with us now, as in, do you think you're going to be, has this, the thinking that you've done during these past 4 weeks, has it helped you in any way to be a bit more open? Or maybe not?
I think I'm not going to stop asking people and putting myself in the open and risking it. I think the gains that I get from that action are much better, much worthwhile than any pity thing that nobody will go against me, So I much prefer doing it. I will carry on doing it in the open, and if anybody don't like it, please let me know, and I will go somewhere else.
Very good. And anybody else? Eleanor, Guy?
Yeah, well, I've got a lot out of this course, not just about open research, but about research and the whole area. Because my experience of academic research has been quite sort of terrifying before, and because it's very formulaic in the language and so on, although I have found how to fit my ideas around that, but it's given me a really great sense of the whole area of open research is up for invention and personal invention and taking parts and adapting them, and I really, there's a lot of things I will definitely use, so thank you very much indeed.
Great. And one of the things I was going to say, Eleanor, if you do start blogging more in the open, so I know that you do it within your whatever your more close group, but if you do start blogging in the open, then let us
I will do that.
We'd love to actually read what it is that you're researching. So that's please do that. Yes. Okay. Any more comments? Anyone?
So I'm just looking on the hackpad, and again, Catherine, thank you for your comments. Really enjoyed the session, the video contributions, and just found it useful to actually have these conversations and sound it out, these ideas with everyone involved. So again, we really appreciate that everyone has taken part. Deborah's kind of made a comment that it's definitely helped her reflect and make connections, so that's always good. And it's just, as I think everybody has found, it's about time, isn't it? About making sure you can fit it all in. Sometimes been a little bit difficult. But Guy, I like your comment, and I'm just going to add another word to it. So just talking about being open, it says criticism, and I'm going to add and comments of any sort, means someone is listening to your ideas, and that's better than being ignored. So I think that was really, really good.
Very good. Well, then in that case, thank you very much from us here, not just Natalie and myself, but Beck and Rob and the rest of the OER Research Hub team. Thank you very much for having come along and shared your experiences with us during these last 4 weeks. The forums will stay open, so we don't know exactly whether we're going to do another kind of facilitators version of the course, or haven't really discussed that yet. But anyway, the materials will stay there for ever and ever. So come back to them, come back to the conversations, go back to. If you haven't had time to do all the activities, you still have time next week, week after next, whenever it is that you're ready for it. There'll be one last communication from us probably next Monday, because we'll ask you to complete a brief questionnaire for us, so to get feedback on the course and the parts that went well, or the parts obviously that we can improve, and we'll also give you instructions on how to get a badge. So if you have completed the course, you can actually apply for a badge. But the instructions on how to get for your badge will be sent probably on Monday. So again, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. We are delighted how things went, and we hope to do it all over again. We're learning, obviously, this was our first experience with putting together a School of Open course. It's been fun. Obviously, probably there's much stuff we can improve on, but hopefully we'll do with your help. So again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. If you have any questions, let us know. We're still here, and keep in touch. Let us know about what it is that you're doing with your open research.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll stop broadcasting now.